Part 1. I was just the ATM with a pulse. They left me nothing, so I walked away from my family forever. You think you're building a legacy until one day you realize you're just building someone else's comfort at the cost of your own soul. That was the day I stopped being their son and started reclaiming my life. I still remember the way the mahogany table felt beneath my fingertips. Cool, polished, indifferent. Like the people sitting across from me. My parents, my brother, and me. I had walked into that estate meeting thinking it was just a formality. Some paperwork, a quick confirmation of what felt obvious. That after all I'd done, there would be fairness. Some sort of recognition, maybe not in words, but in numbers. Instead, I walked out feeling like I'd been gutted. My name is Jason Michelle. I'm 32 years old. I built my contracting business from the ground up. Sleepless nights, scraped knuckles, ramen dinners. And yet, at that moment, sitting in a cold Boston law office, it became painfully clear that none of that mattered. Not to the people I had called family. Growing up, I always knew my brother Derek was the favorite. It's not paranoia, it's not insecurity, it's just fact. He was 5 years younger, charismatic, charming, struggled in school, always in trouble, and always forgiven. I was the opposite. Quiet, focused, the responsible one. I thought that meant something. I thought being the reliable son came with some kind of unspoken promise. But no one tells you that being dependable often just makes you invisible. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, my parents clapped politely, took me to Applebee's, handed me a $50 card. 2 weeks later, when Derek's baseball team won a regional championship, they threw a whole damn party. New grill, decorations, extended family, and a $500 gaming system. That day, something inside me shifted. I learned that love in my house wasn't given equally. It was earned through performance. Derek's kind of performance. Still, I held on. I thought maybe if I worked harder, achieved more, they'd see me. College, 3 jobs, little sleep, no help, no pity, just grit. I put myself through Boston University and came out with barely any debt. Derek, on the other hand, mediocre grades, private university. My parents paid every dime. When I asked why, my dad shrugged. He's not as independent as you, Jason. He needs more support. That line stuck with me like a thorn in my chest. Because support isn't just about money, it's about belief. And they didn't believe in me, not really. They just relied on me. When my father had his heart attack, I covered the $30,000 insurance gap without hesitation. Postponed critical equipment upgrades in my own company. Skipped holidays. Gutted my savings. And when my parents said they were struggling with rising property taxes, I didn't ask questions. I set up a $1,800 a month transfer and kept it moving. Because that's what you do for family. But it wasn't family. Not really. Not anymore. It was a one-way street lined with expectations and empty gratitude. That Friday, when I sat down across from them at the estate meeting, I felt something. A disturbance. My mother's eyes wouldn't meet mine. My father kept fiddling with his cufflink. Derek looked like he was waiting for a job interview. Expensive watch, smug half smile. Attorney Wilson cleared his throat and started reading. Every asset, the house, the retirement accounts, the life insurance, all going to Derek. I was to receive my father's old baseball card collection and a recipe book from my grandmother. I laughed. I actually laughed. Out loud. At first I thought it was a joke, some kind of horrible misprint. But when I looked at my father and he finally raised his eyes, I knew. "This isn't personal, Jason," he said, his voice breaking like he knew it was. "You've done well for yourself. Derek just needs more." That was the moment, the fracture, the detonation. Because it wasn't about the money. Not really. It was the years of sacrificing my own future for their comfort. It was the quiet acceptance I'd carried, thinking one day they'd acknowledge the weight I bore. But all I ever was, in their eyes, was capable. And capable people don't need love. They just need to produce. Even worse, I learned that the mortgage I'd been paying, it wasn't the original mortgage at all. They had refinanced their debt-free home, $275,000, to fund Derek's new business venture. An upscale sports bar, another doomed fantasy, and they never told me. They just let me pay. They used me. Every transfer, every dollar, every sleepless night I spent worrying about their comfort was actually for Derek. I walked out of that office and didn't look back. My mother called after me. My father raised his voice. Derek didn't say a word, but I had nothing left to give. I went home and did the one thing I'd never let myself do before. I opened every bank statement, every Venmo, every wire transfer. I tracked every penny I had given them over the years. The medical bills, the car repairs, the surprise gifts, the monthly support. Over $175,000, and for what? A card collection, a recipe book. I wasn't their son, I was their donor. That night I sent a single text when my mother asked about the mortgage. Not mine. Sometimes the hardest truth isn't what they did to you. It's realizing how long you let them. But the real story, that begins when you finally say no. Part 2, they called me heartless, so I gave them the cold truth. They needed a wake-up call. I gave them silence. When someone finally stops enabling toxic behavior, the people who benefited most will scream the loudest. That was my family, crying betrayal while ignoring the years they betrayed me. The next morning, I woke up to 12 missed calls, 3 voicemails from my father, 2 text messages from my mother that swung wildly between, "Are you okay?" and "How could you do this to us?" Derek had sent just one. Again, making everything about you. It was almost funny in its predictability. The moment I stopped paying, they all panicked. Not because they missed me, but because they missed the money. For the first time in years, I didn't respond. No explanations. No apologies. Just quiet. That silence was my first taste of peace. I'd spent my whole adult life stepping in to catch every financial fall, to soften every blow. I was the cushion between my family and the consequences of their own choices. And without me, they were finally feeling the impact. The pressure started instantly. Emotional texts, guilt-tripping phone calls, even a message from a cousin I barely spoke to asking, "Are you really cutting off your parents during a crisis?" A crisis they created. With my money. They spun the story like I had abandoned them, but I hadn't abandoned anyone. I was reclaiming myself. I started documenting everything. Bank transfers, email receipts, texts with my father asking for help with the plumbing or a short-term bridge loan that never got repaid. I wanted a clear record, not because I needed to defend myself, but because I knew they would try to twist it. They always had. That week, my assistant Tina intercepted a call from my mother. "She said she's worried about your mental state," Tina told me hesitantly. "Asked if you've been acting strange. Said she's concerned about erratic decisions." It took me a moment to register what she meant. They were trying to discredit me, in my workplace, in my life. Because I had dared to say no. I called my lawyer friend Sarah that night. She was blunt. "This isn't normal family drama. They're harassing you and weaponizing concern to manipulate you. You have every right to cut contact, and you might even need legal protection." I wasn't ready for restraining orders. Not yet. But I began keeping a log, just in case. 3 days after I stopped the transfer, my mother texted, "Mortgage due today. Bank threatening foreclosure." 2 words. That's all I wrote back. Not mine. No explanation, no emotion, just truth. She sent a crying emoji, then silence. My father wasn't so restrained. He called within minutes. I picked up. Probably shouldn't have. What the hell is wrong with you? Your mother is having a breakdown. The house is in danger. I took a deep breath and said what I had rehearsed 100 times in my mind. You remortgaged your house without telling me, used my money to fund Derek's business, then wrote me out of your will. I'm done. This isn't my problem. He exploded, called me selfish, ungrateful, cold. After everything we've done for you, that line again. Everything they had done? They hadn't paid a cent toward my business, hadn't supported my college tuition beyond a token amount. I'd given them over $175,000, and they gave it to Derek. What exactly had they done for me? I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I simply ended the call and blocked their number. That was the first boundary, and it held. The following week, they escalated. My parents showed up unannounced at one of my job sites. I was in the middle of reviewing a project bid when the site manager came to find me. Gown? There's an older couple here asking for you, said it's urgent. They look kind of upset. I stepped out and saw them, my mother clutching her purse like a lifeline, my father standing stiff, red-faced with restrained rage. I didn't invite them in. I walked them outside past the trucks and concrete dust and said one sentence. This isn't appropriate. My mother looked ready to cry. Jason, please, we need to talk. Just the three of us. You had your chance, I said, cold but calm. At the lawyer's office. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. My father opened his mouth to argue, but I raised a hand. Don't embarrass yourself here. This is my business. My space. You don't get to disrupt it just because you've lost control. That was the last time I saw them in person. Over the next few months, the silence stretched like a rubber band. Tight, tense, but holding. I spoke to my Aunt Emma regularly. She was the only one who didn't try to guilt-trip me. In fact, she was the one who called me with news I didn't expect. Your parents are 2 months behind on the mortgage. The bank sent a notice, and Derek's sports bar is failing. She paused, then added, reality's hitting them hard. A part of me felt vindicated. Another part felt nothing. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just done. Sometimes silence is louder than shouting, and sometimes walking away isn't giving up. It's finally choosing yourself. They tried to ruin my reputation. I let the truth speak for itself. Part 3, they tried to ruin my reputation. I let the truth speak for itself. My family's smear campaign failed because I had receipts. They called it a meltdown. They whispered about my mental state, but I wasn't breaking down, I was breaking free. And when they came for my reputation, I responded with facts. Cold, hard, undeniable. It started with a whisper. My cousin Jennifer called me, hesitant, voice thin over the phone. Hey, I just wanted to check on you. Your mom called. She said you've been off lately. I felt it like a slap. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was a campaign. A calculated attempt to reframe my silence, my boundaries, as instability. Off, I repeated, stunned. Yet, she said she's worried you're overworking, that you might be making impulsive decisions. She said something about stress and how you've always had trouble asking for help. It was subtle, just enough concern to sound plausible. But I knew exactly what they were doing. They were trying to discredit me so that if I told the truth, no one would believe me. I thanked Jennifer and hung up. Then I sat down and opened a new Google Doc. At the top, I typed, Family Financial Contributions. Verified. I spent the next 5 hours compiling everything, transfers, receipts, screenshots, timestamps. $175,000 over 5 years. Detailed, dated, indisputable. I wasn't going to broadcast it, but I needed it. I needed to protect myself. Because my parents were no longer just manipulating me. They were trying to manipulate everyone around me. And the more I pulled away, the more aggressive they became. My friend Michael called me one night after work. He sounded pissed. "Dude, your mom called me at the office." I sat up straight. "What?" "She said she was worried about you, that you were making erratic decisions. Asked if anyone at the site noticed mood swings. Said you might be having some kind of breakdown." Michael is a no BS guy. Loyal, grounded. He didn't buy it. But the fact that they'd gone that far, they were willing to damage my career just to regain control. Sarah, my lawyer friend, was furious when I told her. "This is harassment. You need to document every call, every incident. You don't need to take legal action now, but you might soon." She was right. I started logging it all. The missed calls, the voicemails, the accidental drop-ins at job sites, the smear campaign, the attempts to isolate me, and slowly, something inside me changed. I stopped being angry. I stopped trying to understand why. Instead, I started accepting a brutal truth. My parents didn't love me for who I was. They loved me for what I provided. When I stopped providing, they didn't grieve the relationship. They tried to destroy me. That kind of realization breaks something in you, but it also sets you free. One day I got a call from Aunt Emma. She had always been the quiet observer in our family. Never meddled, never took sides. But this time she was calling to warn me. "Jason, your mom reached out to me asking for money. She said you abandoned them. Said you were unstable and might hurt yourself." My stomach dropped. "Did she say anything about the estate planning?" A pause. "No," she said quietly. "She didn't mention it at all." That was the moment I sent her the document. All of it. Every contribution, every receipt, every dollar. There was a long silence after she opened it. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Jason, I had no idea." And that's when the tide began to turn. Aunt Emma told Rachel. Rachel told Uncle Frank. One by one, the story started to shift. People began to ask questions. Why didn't Susan mention the inheritance? Wait, Jason paid for your surgery? You let him pay the mortgage for that long and still gave everything to Derek? I wasn't the villain anymore. I was the one who had kept quiet too long. I hadn't wanted to destroy them. I just wanted peace. But when they threatened my name, my integrity, my livelihood, I had to speak. And when I finally did, I didn't need to scream. I let the truth speak for itself. The fallout was messy. Some extended family members were furious at them. Others tried to stay neutral, but for the first time, the manipulation had cracks. The story didn't hold. My parents went quiet. The calls stopped. The texts slowed to a trickle. And for the first time in years, I could hear myself think. I took that silence and turned it into something sacred. I renovated a fixer-upper I'd been putting off for years, started hiking again, rebuilt friendships I'd let fade. And I met someone. Her name was Alexandra, an architect. Smart, kind, unafraid of truth. She didn't ask me to explain my story right away. She let it unfold. When I finally told her everything, she didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with clarity. It takes strength to walk away, she said, but it takes wisdom not to go back. I held on to that, because there were days I doubted myself, days I missed the illusion of family. But Alexandra reminded me that love isn't a transaction, and boundaries aren't cruelty. They're self-respect. They wanted me to look unstable. But all they did was reveal their own cracks. The truth is, walking away wasn't my breakdown. It was my breakthrough. Part 4. When the money dried up, so did their love. I stopped paying and finally saw the truth about my family. The mortgage payment was 2 days late. My father's voice trembled with anger. My mother sent crying emojis, but not one of them asked if I was okay, only what I could give. That's when I understood. What we had wasn't love. It was dependency, dressed up as family. The text came at 9:17 a.m. like clockwork. Mortgage payment due today. Bank threatening foreclosure. There was no "Hi, Jason," no "How are you," not even a please, just a demand. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. For years, this kind of thing would have sent me into a panic, rushing to call the bank, calculating what I could shuffle around to make it work. But this time, I typed 2 words, "Not mine." It felt like taking a deep breath after years underwater. 20 minutes later, the phone rang. It was my father. "Your mother is having a breakdown," he snapped. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to this family?" I didn't respond right away. I let the silence do what words never could. "This childish behavior stops now," he said. "You have responsibilities." I think that's when it truly hit me. He wasn't angry because they were losing the house. He was angry because they were losing control, because their golden goose had stopped laying. "That house," I said calmly, "you mortgaged it behind my back. You gave the money to Derek. You structured your will to give him everything. And now you want me to keep making payments? For what? Out of loyalty?" "Because we're your parents," he barked. "And I've repaid that debt 10 times over," I said. "I'm not your son. I'm your wallet. And I'm closing the account." He hung up. And just like that, it was done. The following weeks were quiet, but heavy. I wasn't just dealing with the fallout of cutting off financial ties. I was dealing with the emotional debris of a lifetime of imbalance. Every time I opened my fridge and saw food I'd bought with my own money, it felt different. Mine. Every bill I paid without also worrying about someone else's drama felt like freedom. I started to notice how my body changed. Less tension in my shoulders, more sleep. Even my headaches faded. Financial abuse is invisible until it's gone. Then you realize how deeply it was woven into your nervous system. Aunt Emma called again. She was becoming my lifeline in all of this. "They missed another mortgage payment," she said gently. "The bank sent a formal notice, and Derek, well, let's just say the sports bar isn't exactly thriving." I didn't even flinch. The old me would have felt guilt, responsibility, a desperate need to fix. Now I felt clarity. They were adults, grown, capable people who had made choices. And now they were experiencing the consequences. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't vengeful. I was just absent, like they had been for me. Word began to spread in the family. Not for me. I hadn't told a soul outside of Aunt Emma and my inner circle. But when people noticed my parents struggling, they started asking questions. That's when my mother began reaching out to the extended family, telling her version of events. "Jason abandoned us. We don't know what happened. We're worried about him." Always just vague enough to sound sad, just manipulative enough to garner sympathy. But this time it didn't land, because the truth was already making its way around. And when people found out I had been paying their mortgage on a home I didn't live in, that they'd secretly remortgaged to fund Derek's fantasy, they started to see. Why didn't she mention that? Wait, Jason was supporting them all this time? They gave everything to Derek? Little cracks in the facade. Tiny truths that turned pity into skepticism. Meanwhile, Derek's life was unraveling too. According to Aunt Emma, the bar was losing money fast. He'd taken out a personal loan, then a second. He was bartending at his own place just to keep the doors open. He even asked my father if they could pull more money from the investment accounts. But there was nothing left to pull. I wish I could say I felt satisfaction watching him struggle. But mostly, I just felt distance, detachment. I wasn't rooting for him to fail. I just knew I wasn't responsible if he did. And somewhere in the middle of all that wreckage, something unexpected happened. I started to heal. Not in big, dramatic ways, but in quiet ones. I went to therapy. I kept journaling. I had long talks with Alexandra about trust, obligation, and the kind of family we wanted to build someday. I said things out loud I'd never said before. I don't think I ever felt loved by them, just used. I thought being useful meant being worthy. I was afraid to stop giving because I thought it was the only reason they kept me around. She never tried to fix me. She just listened. And in that listening, something began to shift. I stopped seeing myself as the villain in their story and started becoming the hero in my own. Love without respect isn't love, and giving without receiving isn't generosity, it's surrender. I finally learned the difference, and I never looked back. Part 5. The letter that changed everything. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. It was my father's handwriting. Neat, deliberate, the kind he used for tax returns and engineering diagrams. I expected a demand, a defense-bahua, maybe another guilt trip. But what I found was something I never thought I'd receive from him. An apology. It had been months since the blow-up. The calls had stopped. The passive-aggressive voicemails dried up. Even Derek had gone silent. Maybe out of shame, maybe because he'd finally run out of things to say. I had rebuilt the scaffolding of my life. My business was booming. I'd bought a modest but beautiful 2-bedroom home with a little garden out back. I was seeing Alexandra regularly, and we were talking about maybe, just maybe, taking a trip together. Something normal. Something mine. I was finally breathing an air that didn't smell like obligation. Then one morning the mail came. There was a white envelope with my name written in ink that hadn't changed in 30 years. It was my father's handwriting. I stared at it for a full 5 minutes before opening it. Inside was a 3-page letter, handwritten. No salutation like "Dear Jason." Just a direct beginning, as if he couldn't bring himself to write the word "son" anymore. I've started and torn up this letter at least a dozen times. Every version sounded wrong, too defensive, too proud, too pathetic. The truth is, your mother and I were wrong. That sentence stopped me. I blinked, reread it. We took your strength as a license to lean. We took your success as permission to neglect. We assumed you'd always be there. And in doing so, we forgot how deeply we hurt you. The estate planning meeting was not just a mistake, it was a betrayal. You were right to walk away. I swallowed hard. I wasn't expecting to feel this way. I thought I'd be angry, vindicated. But instead, I just felt grief. Selling the house was humbling. It forced us to face our choices without the safety net you had always provided. Derek is struggling, yes, but even he is starting to realize the consequences of easy money and unearned comfort. As for us, we are learning slowly how to live within our means, how to be grown-ups after all this time. The letter ended with no big promise. No, let's start over. Just an opening. If you're willing to talk, I would like to start rebuilding something. Not out of guilt, but out of honesty. No expectations, no strings. Just a conversation between two men who've hurt each other and maybe want to heal. He signed it, "With love and regret, Dad." I sat in silence for a long time. The letter didn't undo everything. It didn't erase the sleepless nights, the betrayal, the years of feeling unseen. But it cracked something open. Because for the first time in my entire life, my father saw me, not as a bank account, not as a fallback plan, but as a man, as a son, as someone he'd failed. And he wasn't trying to justify it. He wasn't trying to twist it. He was owning it. That night I called him. He picked up on the second ring, breath catching like he hadn't expected me to respond. The conversation was awkward, hesitant, full of starts and stops. But it was real. We didn't solve everything in that call. We didn't pretend the past hadn't happened. But we started something new. Over the next few weeks, I reestablished careful contact. Coffee with Dad on Thursday mornings. Occasional texts from Mom, quieter now, more cautious. Even Derek reached out. We had our reckoning. He admitted in his own fumbling way that he had been entitled. That he resented my success not because I made him feel small, but because it made him feel exposed. "You were doing everything right," he said once over beers, "and I just wasn't. I didn't want to look at that, so I played the victim. I'm sorry, man." I didn't forgive him instantly, but I listened. And that was enough to begin. That Christmas, I gave my parents a check. Not for their mortgage, not to bail anyone out. Just a down payment for their new, smaller condo. A one-time gift. "This isn't about obligation," I told them. "It's not a return to how things used to be. It's a gesture. Freely given. Freely ended." They nodded. No protests, no expectations. Just quiet gratitude. My relationship with Alexandra grew stronger. We traveled to Maine, then Montreal. She met my Aunt Emma and my new circle of friends. We talked about the future. Kids. Maybe building something together? Not just a house, but a life grounded in transparency, mutual care, and chosen family. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch of my new place, coffee in hand, and think about how close I came to losing myself. How I'd almost let guilt keep me in a prison built by tradition and silence. But I didn't. I chose boundaries. I chose peace. I chose me. Apologies can't erase the past, but they can open a door to something better. Not a return to what was, but a careful, conscious choice to build what could be. Forgiveness doesn't mean going back. Part 6. Forgiveness doesn't mean going back. I forgave my family, but I didn't lose myself again. They thought forgiveness meant everything would return to the way it was. But I had no interest in going back. I forgave them, not to rebuild the past, but to reclaim my future. Forgiveness didn't come all at once. It wasn't some sunrise moment, glowing and clear. It came in pieces. A Thursday coffee with my dad that didn't end in tension. A text from my mother that didn't ask for anything. A moment of silence at dinner where no one tried to fill the space with guilt or denial. It came in the form of stillness. And in that stillness, I began to heal. We were slowly, quietly rebuilding something. But it wasn't a return to the old house. That house was gone. Sold. Gone with it, the walls that echoed with silent expectations, and the attic where secrets were stored like boxes no one wanted to unpack. What we were building now was different, smaller, safer, built on rock instead of sand. I had boundaries, and for the first time, they weren't being tested daily. My parents had moved into a modest condo. My father did part-time consulting, not to feel useful, as he put it, but to pay the bills. My mother began volunteering at an elementary school, eventually earning a part-time position as a teaching aide. She said working with kids gave her purpose again, maybe for the first time. They were figuring out how to survive without leaning on me. That felt like grace. Derek was changing too. Slowly, and not without setbacks. The bar closed eventually, quietly, without drama. He sold off the equipment and took a job managing inventory for a sports retailer. Not glamorous, but steady. One evening over a beer, he told me, "I don't hate you anymore." I blinked. "I didn't know you did." "I did. Not because of what you did, but because of what you didn't do, like fall apart. I wanted you to screw up, so bad. Because if you did, I wouldn't have to feel like such a mess." He laughed, but his eyes were glassy. I didn't respond right away. There was nothing to say. We just sat in it. Sometimes that's the best you can do. I kept going to therapy. The things I unearthed were hard to face, like how often I measured my worth and what I could give others. How uncomfortable I was being cared for. How I didn't know who I was without someone needing me. It was Alexandra who helped me see the difference between love and performance. "You don't have to prove your worth by bleeding," she told me once. And that stuck with me, because for most of my life, I believed that being needed was the only way to feel loved. But need isn't love, and love isn't dependency. Love is freedom. When the holidays came, they felt lighter. Not perfect. Not like the curated family photos you see on Facebook, but real. No one asked me to cover anything. No one handed me an emotional invoice for past sacrifices. We exchanged gifts that felt thoughtful, not transactional. And when I hugged my mother, I didn't flinch. That was new. My life didn't just go back to normal, it moved forward. I kept investing in my business, but now I also invested in joy. I started gardening. It's funny how calming it is to watch something grow because you chose to tend it, not because it was expected. Alexandra and I started looking at land, not because we needed space, but because we wanted to build a home. Together. One filled with boundaries and beauty and chosen traditions. A few months later, I got a letter from my cousin Rachel. She'd been quiet throughout the family drama. I hadn't heard much from her since I sent out my documentation months earlier. She wrote, I just wanted you to know your story helped me walk away from something I thought I had to keep enduring. I saw myself in your silence and in your courage. I didn't cry often anymore, but that one got me because I realized this wasn't just about my family. It was about a pattern so many of us fall into, confusing self-sacrifice for love, guilt for loyalty, silence for peace. But none of those are love. Love, real love, makes room for your no. It doesn't punish your honesty. It doesn't disappear when you draw a line. So yes, I forgave them. I let go of the resentment, the weight, the story I had carried on my back like a burden I thought I owed them. But I didn't go back. I didn't become the Jason they could rely on to pay, to fix, to patch every hole in the ship they refused to steer. I became the Jason who chooses, who gives freely or not at all, who walks away when necessary, who believes he is enough even when no one is asking him to prove it. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's remembering without bitterness. It's healing without reopening. It's choosing peace, not because they've earned it, but because you have. Breaking generational patterns starts with one voice. Part 7. Breaking generational patterns starts with one voice. I stopped the cycle, and that changed everything. I used to think breaking the cycle meant destroying everything. But now I know. It means choosing something better. Not just for me, but for whoever comes after me. The old patterns didn't break the day I walked out of the lawyer's office. They didn't shatter when I stopped the payments, or when I received the apology letter, or even when I forgave them. They broke the day I stopped apologizing for wanting something different. Because for so long, I thought I had to carry the weight of it all. The unspoken expectations, the role of the fixer, the emotional translator, the good son. But somewhere along this journey, I realized that weight was never mine to carry. And it ends with me. Alexandra and I bought the land, not a sprawling estate, just a modest plot overlooking a quiet river and a field that catches the sunset like it was designed for healing. We're building a home there, from scratch. I insisted on laying the foundation myself. She's designing the interiors. We joke that it's symbolic. I'll make it stand, she'll make it beautiful. But we both know deep down it's more than that. It's a metaphor for what we're building together. A life, a family, a legacy that isn't weighed down by guilt, obligation, or silence. My parents came to visit the land once. They stood at the edge of the dirt, my father quietly inspecting the elevation, my mother clutching her sweater in the breeze. No one said much, but when they left, my father shook my hand, not like a dad to a son, but like a man to another man. You've built something strong, he said, and he wasn't just talking about the house. Derek visits sometimes too. He brings coffee, offers to help with the wiring. We talk less about the past now and more about the future. He's different. Not perfect, but present. He said once, staring out at the land, I used to envy you. Now I admire you, because you did the hard thing. I smiled because I knew exactly what he meant. Setting boundaries? That's hard. Saying no to family? That's harder. Changing a family pattern that's been reinforced for decades? That's a mountain, but I climbed it. And I didn't do it with anger or vengeance or bitterness. I did it with truth. And truth once spoken doesn't need to shout. I get emails now, people who've watched my story or heard about it through family or mutual friends, telling me they finally saw their own lives in mine. Strangers, cousins, childhood friends. One woman wrote, "Your story gave me permission to stop apologizing for wanting peace." Another said, "I showed my husband your video. He finally understood why I stopped talking to my parents last year." And that's when it really hit me. This wasn't just my healing. This was our healing. Because the stories we tell about the ones we've been too ashamed to say out loud are the ones that give others permission to change too. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like the emotional mule in your family, if you've ever paid the bills, fixed the chaos, stayed quiet to keep the peace, if you've ever walked away and wondered if it made you heartless, hear me when I say this. You are not heartless. You are healing. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is not to stay, but to step away and let the silence speak for itself, to draw the line that should have been drawn generations ago, and in doing so, give the next generation a better starting place. My story isn't a fairy tale. It's messy, wounded, unfinished. But it's mine now. Not the one I was handed, but the one I wrote. And if I have children someday, or even just a community of people I love deeply, I'll tell them this. You do not have to earn your worth. You are not here to carry the pain of others. And your voice, even trembling, can be the one that ends the cycle. I walked away from everything I knew, and I didn't do it to destroy my family. I did it to rebuild myself. And in that choice, I finally found peace.